Sana, is Bruce joining us today? You're on mute.
Yes, Bruce will be joining us today. Jermel is off on vacation, so I asked him not to dial in.
Okay, thank you.
Bruce is going to be here.
Thank you. Okay, we're good afternoon and welcome everybody. I will now call the Building Construction Process Review Task Force to order. At this meeting, it is being held electronically, and I'd like to go over some rules of procedure for the benefit of members and the viewing public. This meeting is being streamed live via the City of Brantford YouTube account. All members will be muted upon entering the meeting and throughout when they are not speaking, in order to reduce background noise. All web cameras for members shall be turned on throughout the meeting. If a member needs to leave their seat, please leave the camera on so that we recognize you are away. Staff will be requested to join the video meeting should they need to answer questions of members. Any members should indicate they wish to speak by pressing the raise hand button on the participant list screen on the bottom right-hand side. Clerk staff will track raised hands to generate the speaking list and will lower the hand when you've been added to the speakers list or recognized by the chair for your speaking opportunity. Movers and seconders of motions shall be indicated by raising your hand on camera, and the chair will call out who the mover and seconder are. All members participating via online video conference will vote by a physical show of hands. A recorded vote will be taken by the clerk. So when we do that, please raise your hand and keep it raised until the clerk has called your name. Delegates are participating via Zoom or telephone accordingly. All persons wishing to speak to the items on the agenda were required to register by 9 a.m. On the day of. In the event a connection service interruption occurs that affects quorum, we may recess the meeting for up to 15 minutes to regain quorum. If quorum is not achieved, the meeting is adjourned. So, Madam Clerk, would you please take the roll call?
Councillor Carpenter?
Here.
Councillor McCreary?
Here.
Mayor Davis?
Here.
Councillor Utley?
Here. Thank you. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest on any items on the agenda? If so, could you please raise your hand? I see no hands raised. So item 3, there are no presentations or delegations for today's meeting. 4, as per section 15.6.3, presentations of the city's procedural bylaw allows for a 10-minute inclusive of questions time period. Further, each member of the task force would have only 2 speaking opportunities on the item. If there are no objections, I would suggest that we waive those 2 rules to allow for greater discussion with the consultant. So if there are any objections, could you please raise your hand now? No hands raised. Thank you so much. 4.1, I would ask now Aaron Wallace to introduce the consultants for the City of Brantford Development Review. Aaron, welcome.
So good afternoon, Aaron Wallace, Director of Corporate Initiatives. Just very briefly wanted to give members an update on the project, talk about the purpose of today's meeting, and then talk about next steps. So committee will recall meeting on August the 5th with the consultants. And the purpose of that meeting was for the consultant to lay out the observations that had come from their preliminary work with discussions with developers, with counselors and other staff. And the purpose of that meeting was to make sure those observations were in line with the kind of work and the kind of investigation that members wanted us to do, and also in line with the goals of the project from the task force's perspective. So today you can think of as part 2 of that discussion. With those observations in mind, the consultant has done a lot of work to bring, as you see in the report, some detailed recommendations and an implementation plan for how you can start to address some of those observations. So I do note that committee has waived the rules for more frequent speaking opportunities. So the consultant and staff are at your disposal as you work through that document. In terms of the format of today's meeting, I will defer to Sana on that. But from a staff perspective, the next time council will see this project in front of them will be October 13th at the Committee of the Whole Community Development Committee. And you will see Sana and her team come to council, present the final report, inclusive of the feedback that they received today. And under the direction of the CAO, we'll also include a staff report that lays down a runway for how council can make some decisions based on the work that's been done in this project. So we do note that some of the recommendations are underway. We can note the status of that for council within that staff report. Some of the recommendations may require additional resources. We can look to council's direction on whether that should be forwarded to the estimates process for further consideration. And some of the recommendations may be at no cost, such as changes to policy or bylaw, but we certainly need council's direction on that. So this will all circle back to that meeting on October 13th for all of councilors to see the report and discuss it with the consultant. And under the direction of Mr. Hutchings, we'll bring a staff report to lay down a runway for how council can move forward on some of these. So I'll leave it there. Of course, Asia and I happy to answer any questions on the project this afternoon or otherwise, but I'll pass it back to you, Chair Utley, to move forward with the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron, very much. Really appreciate it. Just before we ask Bruce and Sana to present the report to us, how much time do you think you need to? Normally we would have 10 minutes inclusive of questions, but we're going to waive the number of questions that can be asked. So I just want to get a feel for how much time you need to present the report. And would it be okay if, well, go ahead. How much time do you need to present the report?
Sana?
So, yep, sure. What we have done, Councillor, is I've hidden some of the slides. So you have received the whole deck. Yep. But because of the shortened time for the meeting, we're not going to be going over through all the findings, observations. So we just highlighted a few.
That's
so
good.
Having said that, we'll just focus on some and we'll get to ones that we selected. But I think if we just go based on the presentation and the hidden slides, I think 45 minutes would be fine.
How much time?
45 minutes.
35 minutes. Okay. Is everybody okay with that? I don't see any objections. So, okay. The clock's starting now.
All right. Okay, I'm just going to share my screen here. Just to confirm, can everybody see my screen? Good. Okay. All right, so I'm just gonna, again, first of all, thanks everybody for having us over again and giving us the opportunity to present. We have Bruce here as well. Jermel, who really assisted with this deck, is not here today. He's on vacation. So to start off, for the objectives today is, in the last meeting, as Aaron had pointed out, we had presented to you 39 observations. There was in addition to that one, and we'll get to that, but there are 40 observations. So we won't get into the details of all of them today, but we do want to talk about a few and then discuss the detailed recommendations and the implementation plan. Very briefly, in terms of our approach and work plan, as you know, we've had multiple meetings with you. We've done the environmental scan, the jurisdictional scan, and right now we're on phase 4, which is the recommendations and implementation plan development. So the report is in a good shape right now to be presented to council. And obviously, if you have any feedback after our meeting today, we'll incorporate that as we go to the next stage. Before we get into the details of the 40 observations, I think the perception sometimes might be that there was a lot is going wrong and there's not enough good. But we just want to start off on the positive note that during our stakeholder consultations and our process mapping, with internally and externally, we did hear a lot of positive feedback from the community, and we had reiterated that in our previous meeting as well. But overall, our stakeholder engagement clearly revealed that Brantford's foundation is solid, and there is a strong interest in working together to identify and implement incremental improvements. So we want to start off with that note. So despite the 40 observations, there's still a lot good going on in the planning department and the engineering department, with room for improvement, which we will address later on. In terms of the observations, as you know, out of the 40 observations, they're based on internal and external feedback that we received. There was a lot of good feedback we received from the process mapping sessions, which was attended by frontline staff. And also some observations were based on best practices that we had. So during our consultations with internal staff and the development community, we identified 50 pain points. And this is, you've heard this before, just want to sort of refresh your memory. We identified 50 pain points, and we took those and bucketed them into 6 different layers. So services and process, people and organization, governance, technology, customer, and fee structures. So there are a total of 40 observations there. So moving on, since you know what the observations are, we'll get into the detailed recommendations. And one of our commitment to you was that we were going to prioritize our recommendations. And I just want to briefly spend some time on this slide. What you're seeing here is a heat map. So on the x-axis is the impact on the city of Brantford of our recommendations. And on the y-axis is the difficulty to implement those recommendations. What you'll notice, and then we took our recommendations and we plotted them here. And what you'll notice is that the impact to the city of Brantford is between medium to high for majority of them. And the difficulty to implement is between low and medium. So you'll see a lot of the recommendations in the first box. The ones that you're seeing highlighted in yellow are the ones that we're going to be presenting today. And the reason why we selected them is firstly because it is on the top side on the impact to the city of Brantford, but also because some of them are quick wins. Some of them we thought it was important for the task force because it impacted maybe the council. And some of them we wanted your feedback on if that is the right recommendation you think going forward. But certainly all of them are important. All these recommendations are on the same scale in terms of importance and recommendation, and we have developed implementation plans for all of them. So for the next slides, we're going to focus on and another thing that we made sure is that we sort of touched upon each of the 6 different layers. So services and processes, people, governance, everything is sort of represented in the 10 that we're sharing today. So to start off with, the first layer is services and processes, and we had 2 recommendations or observations and recommendations here. The first observation that we had, we're going to talk about, is regarding the site plan process. And the observation was that the site plan process is viewed by small developers to be overly complicated and extensive, resulting in delays, negative financial implications, and multiple applications or resubmissions. Site alteration bylaw needs to be updated, and there is a lack of clarity between site alteration permit applications and site plan agreements. So we sort of divided up our recommendations in 2 for this one. The first recommendation was to undertake a review of the city's site plan control bylaw to streamline applications. What we understand is that Brantford's site plan control was last amended in 2018. What we're saying is to review the site plan control bylaw to include exemptions for certain developments. Certain developments that have low to no impact on neighboring properties should be considered for exemption from the site plan control process. Subjecting low to no impact applications to the full site plan control process was identified as a significant pain point by staff. Internal and external stakeholders indicated that site plan control is seldom appropriate for smaller infill development applications and result in significant resourcing inefficiencies. The second recommendation was to update the site alteration permit process and bylaw. What we noted was that the site plan bylaw and process needs to be updated because the city currently requires all applicants to apply for a site alteration permit regardless of whether they are planning or pre-service or not. This process needs to be updated, and so does the bylaw in coordination with the legal department. Second point was that it was noted that sometimes residents or developers requiring the site alteration permit would just drop in, often without an appointment, and inspectors have to come in from outside. Ideally, there should be designated days and times when an inspector should be available to meet with the development community. And lastly, the internal stakeholders and industry representatives indicated that the relationship between the site plan control and site alteration permit is often unclear. The city should identify opportunities to reduce duplication across the two application types, ensuring each serves a distinct planning purpose. And we'll have a detailed implementation plan on how we plan to address this. So Councillor, I don't know if you want to stop and discuss right now, or should I keep going and have any questions, address any questions later? You're on mute. Sorry, Councillor, you're on mute.
John, you're muted.
Thank you. I don't see any hands raised at this time. So unless somebody wants to ask a question right now, I'm going to recommend we continue on. And if you do have questions as we move through, just hit the raise hand button, and then we'll get that question answered for you. Thank
Perfect.
you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sana.
So the second observation under services and processes was that applicants frequently contact senior city staff and elected officials to inquire about the status of an application and discuss other application-related issues. What we're recommending is to develop a mandatory escalation protocol to reduce the negative impact of stakeholder interventions during the formal development review process. Our review indicated that applicants frequently contact senior city staff and elected officials to inquire about the status of an application and to discuss other application-related issues. These stakeholder interventions can result in numerous process inefficiencies, such as time-consuming internal follow-up and reporting requirements, ad hoc reprioritization of development review applications, extended development review timelines, and inefficient workload management for development review staff. To reduce the negative impact of escalations, the city should consider establishing an escalation protocol that includes criteria to trigger a response to escalations and a streamlined reporting process. And at the bottom, what you're seeing is a chart on what the escalation criteria should be and the corresponding reporting process that we're recommending. In terms of people and organization, the observation was that the priorities and mandates of commenting partners might be different across the city, resulting in delays in providing responses, as development review is not a primary function of many roles. And our recommendation is to ensure alignment of priorities across departments involved in the development review process. So once our vision has been established as per recommendation 3.1, and we will talk about that, the next step would be to align or refresh the priorities and mandates of commenting partners across the city. Development review is a collaborative endeavor that requires input and engagement from a broad range of staff. All stakeholders involved in the process should work together towards a cohesive, prioritized citywide position. The departments should update their priorities, mandates, and annual plans to include development application review as a priority that supports the city's vision on development. Councillor, I think you're on mute.
That would help if I unmute myself. Sana, I have a question from Mayor Davis.
Sure.
Yes, Sonia, going back to 1.13, went over that one real fast. So that's, the intent is to reduce the frequency by which applicants immediately jump to calling me or calling counselors to intervene in the process, right?
That's right.
So how you can establish a protocol, but how do you, so as a politician, I have a developer call me, how do I resist? How's that going to reduce this?
No, that's a valid question. I think what we need to do is to promote the escalation protocol, put it up in a visible space, and then let them know that we've come out with a new protocol that they need to follow, and that's the new process. I think once everybody knows that everybody's going to be diverted, and it's an education for the development community as well, that they can't bypass the system. The rules apply to everybody. Over time, they will start listening.
So this breaks down if politicians decide, well, I don't care, I'm going to get involved anyways. 'Cause I work-
Absolutely. I think there should be buy-in from the development community and the politicians as well.
Yeah, okay,
Everybody should stick to that process.
thanks.
Thank you, Mayor Davis. There's a question from Councillor Carpenter.
Yeah, the concern I have here is when the development process is not consistent as it is now. So for example, an infill development in an industrial area, now our new requirements are for large area for large transport truck turnaround, but it's an infill development. And they never had any of that requirement before. And now there's new requirements on them that make the project not even viable. But so staff implement rules for greenfield kind of sites as opposed to infill sites are different. And then when we go around the table for the review, different staff have different comments on what they'd like to see. It's not consistent about what is necessary, but what they'd like to see. And and then when staff are on vacation, we wait 2 weeks for that application for that staff person to come back to submit their questions or comments, and the development proposal is stalled. So I have some concern. In fact, I will never stop representing my constituents when they ask questions on planning or any other issue for that matter at any time, regardless of protocol. So I have some problem with this.
Thank you, Councillor. That's noted by the clerk. Thank you. There are no other raised hands, so Sana, please continue.
So the next observation, the people and organization, was that the roles and responsibilities of key development review stakeholders are not well defined. Lack of clearly defined roles and responsibilities leads to process inefficiencies and bottlenecks in the comment review process as staff assume additional workloads. Also, there is no dedicated staff for reviewing development applications across all departments. And what we're recommending is to define and document development review related roles and responsibilities to reduce these process inefficiencies. Our review identified that the roles and responsibilities of key development review stakeholders are not clearly defined. Clearly defining each stakeholder role and mandate in the development review process will enhance transparency and predictability, as well as empower staff to fulfill their responsibilities. The roles and responsibilities of each stakeholder should be clearly delineated and made available in a publicly accessible location, such as the city's website. To clarify development review related roles and responsibilities and to reduce process inefficiencies, the city should define and document a responsibility assignment matrix, or RACI, for each development application type. And then we talk about what a RACI would do and help with. And I think this is one of our primary findings from our stakeholder interviews, internal and external. In terms of governance, the observation was that a lack of clarity on the purpose of the development review process has led to an adversarial relationship between staff and applicants. This has also created a barrier for collaboration. And what our recommendation is to ensure established policies and procedures under the development review process are reflective of the city's overall vision to align internal and external shareholders around a common purpose. Fundamental stakeholder misalignment on the purpose of the development review process is a key finding from our evidence base. The misalignment contributes to staff and applicant frustration and the adversarial nature of the process, creating a barrier to collaboration. A vision statement is a leading practice used by public and private sector organizations to help guide decision-making, set priorities, and align internal and external stakeholders around a shared purpose. We recommend the city to adopt a vision statement through staff engagement and validation with senior internal stakeholders, as well as industry representatives. The vision will also drive the priorities and mandates of the key stakeholders. The next observation under governance was that the city's current approach to performance measurement is underdeveloped and inconsistent. Many critical elements related to the development review process are not tracked. For example, circulation times and review times by commenting partners. What we're recommending is to establish a performance measurement framework to improve the management and evaluation of the development review process. The use and regular review of performance measures are critical to the success of any organization or complex process. Our analysis indicates that performance measure maturity varies significantly across the departments involved in the development review process. The core challenges currently impacting effective performance measurements include non-integrated, highly manual systems, lack of time tracking across most divisions, inaccurate performance standards, and lack of effectiveness measures. To overcome these challenges, we recommend a refreshed approach to development review performance measurement based on leading practice and realistic processing timelines. What we're recommending is that the city should establish a performance measurement framework to improve the management and evaluation of the development review process. The framework should be grounded in leading practice and analysis of past performance. It should include the identification of key performance indicators, which are KPIs, KPI collection procedures, KPI reporting procedures, and a process for reviewing the effectiveness of KPIs. We have also shared a few efficiency and effective related KPIs, just to note that these are not all inclusive. There could be others which might be more relevant to certain processes.
Sana, I have a question on the last one, please.
Sure.
Great details in there. I fully support them. I didn't see anything there in your recommendations about training of staff and the technical aspect of performance and efficiencies, but also leadership skills as well. You can't do any of these without good leadership skills. So is that somewhere else in the report, or could that be added?
We didn't really specifically feel or think that training was required, except for the project management piece, which we have included, because this whole process is related to project management. And we did talk about that in terms of providing staff with the tools for project management. We can certainly add something about leadership training on that as well.
Okay, thank you.
So under technology and information, the observation was that the current process of electronic application submissions is completed via email, which is a manual and time-consuming process and does not allow for electronic payment of fees. So we sort of have recommended, made two recommendations, a short-term and a longer-term. For the short-term, we noted that the city was proactive in accepting development applications online during the COVID-19 period, which was March 2020 onwards. However, the applicant is still required to make payments in person, which defies the purpose of having an online submission. So in June 2020, the IT team developed an in-house tool that generates an invoice and allows the applicant to pay the dues through e-transfers via auto deposit into the city's bank account. This tool was tested by the building department and worked seamlessly. The tool is also linked with the JD Edwards, allowing the banking information to be updated automatically. What we're recommending to planning and actually other departments is to work with IT, and planning has actually begun doing that already, and implement this tool. So this solution should be implemented taking into consideration lessons learned from the building department. The tool is actually a quick win that would save time and city resources, and should also have a positive impact on the applicant. I think there's a question.
The only question I have, Sana, is I don't see anything in there about securities, repayment of securities once a company has met its requirements for certain stages of their development, that upon successful completion, they get reimbursed for 8%, 25% of that security, and then when the next phase, they get another 25% back. So if that's a concern that was raised by some developers, especially on large multi-million-dollar developments.
Sure, I believe we talk about securities in the fee structure, and I will double check as well.
Already, thank you.
So we spoke about the short term, the quick win solution, and in the long term, what we're recommending is for the city to consider adopting an electronic plan review system. There are 22 municipalities across Ontario that provides an e-permitting or e-plan service. E-plan service refers to an online system that supports the intake of applications and subsequent circulations and steps through to approval. And just moving on to the next slide. In 2015, the town of Markham issued an RFP to procure an e-plan system and cited the following benefits: a reduction in the number of physical trips required to be taken by clients and customers to and from the city, a 24/7, 365 days a year business portal provides unfettered client access to resources, applications, resubmissions, and status tracking, enhanced ability of city departments and external agencies to conduct parallel and collaborative reviews rather than sequentially reducing cycle time, and better records as to what changes have been made by whom and when. Improved concurrency and accuracy of data being transmitted, reduction in and shortened time of application resubmission cycles, shortened time to completion and occupancy of new development, allowing the city to realize increased tax assessment, reduced office space and overhead associated with paper plans and studies, and elimination of archiving and retrieval problems. Documents are always securely stored and may be accessed from anywhere. Better tools to more effectively measure productivity and service level performance. And lastly, it solidified the city's reputation as a leader in technology use, financial efficiency, and customer service. In terms of financial implications, for the city of Brantford, implementing such a system would solve multiple observations raised in this review. Based on compared information, we anticipate the cost to range between 1 to 1.5 million, which includes the software and implementation and 5 years of support and maintenance. And this cost may vary based on the vendor you choose and the services the city undertakes. And we understand the cost of implementing the e-plan can be recovered through land use planning and building permit fees.
There are no hands up, Sana.
Councillor Carpenter's raised his hand.
I'm sorry, Councillor Carpenter, I just saw that.
Oh, you answered it in the last about raising, recouping the 1.5 million through fees. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor.
The next observation is on customer satisfaction. The observation was that to measure customer satisfaction with the development review process to track performance and continually improve the user experience with this city service. And what we noted was that currently the feedback is collected anecdotally through channels like the Home Builders Association or applicant calls to senior staff and elected officials. There is no formal and consistent method for soliciting feedback from applicants. Formally and consistently soliciting feedback from applicants will enable the city to gain insight into the effectiveness and the development review process and staff involved in the process. Current industry feedback is collected anecdotally through channels such as applicant calls, as I mentioned. The city should develop an applicant satisfaction service to better track and continually monitor or improve the customer experience. The city should consider two types of user feedback service: an annual survey distributed on an industry-wide basis to understand system-level satisfaction and trends, and randomly selected pulse-style service following application completion milestones to gather real-time insights into immediate challenges and opportunities that require action. Effective customer satisfaction surveys are short, easy to complete, and generally involve 1 to 5 questions. And the results of the surveys should be published internally and externally and can form part of the performance measurement framework and continuous improvement system that we've recommended. The next observation under customer is the relationship between staff and applicants can sometimes be adversarial and creates a barrier to strong working relationships. Additionally, poor application quality, particularly at time of application submission, drives staff rework and increases processing times. What we're recommending is to establish formal two-way learning opportunities for staff and industry to improve application quality and facilitate collaboration. The staff applicant collaboration is at the center of the development review process depends on mutual understanding. Staff and industry stakeholders identified a need for more frequent and formal opportunities to get together and share experiences and knowledge outside of the development review process. Establishing a formal two-way learning opportunities and for staff and applicants, particularly for manager level and frontline staff, is a potential solution to address this issue. Opportunities we have seen in other jurisdictions include training sessions for entry-level industry consultants, and training sessions for entry-level staff on development strategies. The city should also work with industry associations to identify professional networking events and other development opportunities, such as industry conferences, to foster collegiality. The city can also leverage findings from the jurisdictional scan. For example, the City of Ottawa runs a planning primer education program for the public, which is a series of half-day classes available to applicants and the general public to learn more about the city's development priorities and the details of the development review processes.
Sana, I have a question from Councillor Carpenter.
I like this very much. Would there be also an opportunity to have, I know you talk about two-way learning opportunities, but would there be ability to maybe add a video that any developer, small developer, large developer could click into and see the application process? I know it'd only be one way, but that way they could click on it whenever they want, as opposed to having to meet two-way timelines.
Sure, that's a really good point. I think I might have actually seen it one of the jurisdictional that we have observed, and I can add that in.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Carry on, Sana.
For the fee structure, the observation was that the amount of securities withheld is inappropriate based on the type of application. And simple and small size applications are requested to deposit relatively large amounts of security. Our recommendation was to review security deposit structure to align with the application's type and size. What we noted was that amount of securities withheld is inappropriate based on the type of application. That is, simple and small size applications are requested to deposit relatively large amounts of security. Securities are based on the value of the construction, and a sliding scale is applied. What we're recommending is for the city to revisit the current security structure and determine if it needs to be revised, especially for the smaller developments. I'm going to
go ahead.
No, I was just going to move on if you have a question.
I don't see any hands up.
Okay. So the next phase, what we're going to show here is, so what you've seen is the 10 that we selected to present in the meeting today, just in the interest of time, but we have, for all 40, we have developed a similar sort of recommendation, and we did run it by management to make sure that we're all on the same page, and we took their feedback and incorporated it where they felt that we needed to beef it up a bit, or there was already a control in place, so we made sure that it's reflective of the work that is currently ongoing. In terms of the implementation plan, this section includes our plan to implement the previously identified recommendations. The overall implementation plan includes sections noted below, which are based on our leading practice. So we'll talk about the implementation structure, the roadmap, a scorecard, change management framework, and the communications framework. In terms of the implementation structure, successful implementation of the recommendations included in this report will require dedicated resources and governance for an effective governance. Based on the scope of the identified recommendations, we recommend the creation of a dedicated process improvement, or the PI team, to lead, monitor, and report on the implementation of the report's recommendations. We anticipate one full-time project management resource along with 1 or 2 support staff able to dedicate 25 to 50% of their time to the project. Based on the roadmap, which we'll share, we anticipate staff will be required for approximately 12 months, with the bulk of activity occurring during the first 6 months. The capabilities of the PI team, the process improvement team, would include program and project management, change management, communications, stakeholder engagement, both internal and external, business process improvement, and experience with planning and/or development application reviews. The PI team will also have to draw on subject matter specialists as needed. In terms of the financial and staffing impact and staffing consideration, we have noted that we're suggesting intermediate planners, and the salary ranges between, or the total financial impact would be between 94 to 117,000. The cost per project management consultant ranges from between $120,000 to $140,000 annually. The city would need to consider an external consultant if there is little or no capacity to conduct this work internally. The staff does not have, or if the staff does not possess one or more of the skill sets listed above, or if there is a high risk of turnover, since the team should be committed to the project for at least 12 to 18 months for successful execution.
Sana, got a question from Councillor McCreary.
Thank you, Chair. Is this something that we can replicate in looking at other, quality control changes in other departments, Sana?
When you say replicate,
Or is this going to be a one-off as applicable just to the building and development department?
this can certainly be, we have sort of tailored this approach for the development review process, but I don't see why not. This approach can be taken by other departments and sort of customize it for themselves, because this is a leading practice from KPMG.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if this might, I think it says this will be a year to 18 months.
Mhm.
And I'm just wondering if we might just continue this show and apply the same lessons to other municipal organizations.
Yeah, sure.
Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. There were no other hands raised. And we were at 33 minutes.
I think Councillor Carpenter has a question.
No, I don't see an house.
No? Okay.
I don't see an.
Sorry, I see a hand on the screen. In terms of the implementation structure, alongside the process improvement team, Brantford should establish a clearly defined interdepartmental governance structure to facilitate implementation-related decision-making power and empower the PI team to drive change. We recommend a process improvement committee with the following membership: with the General Manager for Community Development as the chair, General Manager Public Works Commission, Director Engineering or the delegate, Director Planning, Director Environmental Services, Director Park Services, Director Building Services or the Chief Building Officer, and the Director of Economic Development. The mandate of the PI committee should include strategic direction and oversight of the implementation, decision-making on CREED protocols, approvals, and monitoring implementation progress and overall project success. And in the next section, we'll take you through the implementation roadmap. Just going to skip this one. This is how we would recommend the implementation roadmap. For the first thing we would do is, under the recommendation, is to establish a dedicated process improvement team to lead, monitor, and report on the implementation of the recommendations. In terms of the activities, those are develop the roles and responsibilities. You have to recruit the team, consider whether it's going to be an internal or external, and then develop milestones. On top, you can see the timeline for implementation, and it's good. This task in terms of setting up the PI structure, the PI team, it's 0 to 3 months. And then for all the other recommendations that we have, you'll see a similar sort of slide in terms of the timelines. Like I mentioned, this is just as I've hidden the other slides, but in terms of all the recommendations, you'll see the recommendation 1.1, what are the activities that go in there, and in terms of the arrow on top, you'll see the timeline for implementation. So some of them will be 0 to 3, sometimes will be 4 to 6. And the PI team once it's established, they can change the timeline if they feel that we need more time, they can change that as long as it's being tracked and monitored. We're all on the same page. In terms of the implementation scorecard, this section presents a scorecard to help measure the implementation of the identified recommendations. Demonstrating progress will help build buy-in with internal and external stakeholders and facilitate change. This scorecard should be reviewed and approved by the PI committee and reviewed on a monthly basis by the PI team. So we've listed some success factors, and certainly the PI team can add on to this, but at the minimum, it should include the implementation structure. Does it work or not? The project management and customer centricity. The next important part is the change management framework. To help ensure internal and external stakeholders are ready, willing to, and able to implement the change, the City of Brantford should make it clear, ensure senior leadership understand and is committed to the importance of visible, aligned, and ongoing support for an improved development review process. They should make it known, develop and implement a detailed communications plan that clearly articulates the overall case for change to each stakeholder group. Consider identifying champions in each development review related department to help spread the message. Make it real. Clearly define the PI team's roles, responsibilities, and mandate. Develop Detailed change management plans for the recommendations included in this report. Make it happen. Begin implementation, resolve issues, and mitigate risks by escalating them through the appropriate channels. Focus on high impact recommendations and continuously monitor the effect of implementation on each stakeholder group. And make it stick. Use the implementation scorecard to measure progress and maintain momentum. In the long term, use the continuous improvement program included in our recommendation on an ongoing basis. In terms of the communication strategy, communications is a critical change enabler. And in this section, we present 5 strategic principles to support effective communications during a significant process-driven transformation. So first is to equip leaders and change agents, develop tailored key messages, communicate consistent messages, reinforce messages, and engage the industry. That's basically what it is. What we're going to do from this point on is some of the feedback that I've received. I will update the report, and we'll be ready to present to council unless there is more feedback or questions that we can take at this time.
That's it.
Are we on time?
Hold on. We're at just over 38 minutes. And because we had we had some good questions throughout the presentation. First, Sana and Bruce, I want to thank you both for all the work you've put into this report. This is exactly what I was looking for. Exactly, I think, what business and industry is looking for in this community. And I think this is going to build great relationships between our staff and our business community and council as well. As so many positives in this. So I'm just absolutely delighted to receive the report, and I'm looking for other comments from my colleagues here. Councillor Davis, Mayor Davis, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I agree with you. And also what it's going to result in is, I think some of the frustration and on the part of applicants comes through the various departments and staff that are involved in commenting on review applications, like standardizing the process and more of a teamwork approach and being consistent across the board. I mean, that's a common theme I heard both before and during this. The fact that the process is not entirely consistent, and that I think reflects the makeup of characters and staff that have input into such a process. And like I said, you talk about a better teamwork and with collaboration with outside agencies, but I think we'll get it inside as well. So, and over time, I think that'll benefit staff as well.
Yes.
Procedures and process are much clearer for them as well.
Thank you, Mayor Davis. Councillor McCurry, Councillor Carpenter, anything you'd like to say or add?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, John, it's certainly been a long time coming, hasn't it? This report.
It has, yeah.
We've been at this now for a number of years, and I guess it's indicative of the fact, and I guess we want to be positive with respect to our municipal staff, and I'm pleased to see that the report leads off by saying some good things about them, because we know we do have good folks here, but it's indicative that they're just so darn busy that left to their own devices, our staff have never really been able to make inroads with respect to making some of these changes. And I think some of our staff recognize that, we do have some issues and we do have some pain points, as you guys have coined them. But I think it's also important in the report that we see that our staff just don't have the time or the resources to implement the changes on their own. And I guess we're going to have some convincing to do. Hopefully don't have too much convincing to do at budget time to allow this to come forward. It's a significant expense for us, but it's also an investment, I guess, in terms of our building and development community. And we're certainly going to get busier and busier and busier. And this is going to bode well for us if we're able to implement these changes in a hurry. And I just want to also, as John has said, I just want to pay testament to Sana and to Bruce and staff for doing all this great work for us. As they say, you don't know what you don't know, right? And there's sure a lot that we don't know that you guys have been able to help us get on track with here. So thanks very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Carpenter.
Sonia, there's one item that I want some clarification on, and that would be we hear from developers that the site plan application and the site alteration permit are sometimes duplicating services. I think you highlighted that in the original report, but a recommendation of how to correct that, I don't remember seeing that in your presentation.
So I think what we suggested was first we looked at the benchmarking data and we realized that do we need both the processes? And what the benchmarking data led us to see was that other municipalities do have two separate processes. They have site alteration and they have the site plan. So there's nothing wrong in having that. I think what the city needs to do is demonstrate to the community that two separate processes and make that understanding clear to the development community. So that what we're suggesting is what we need, what we're recommending is they need to make sure that the differentiation between the two is very clear on the city's website through the education of the development community, but it's absolutely okay to have two separate processes.
But you could, we still could go forward and have one. The site alteration could be complete as part of the site plan process, could it not?
It could, but it's a decision that the city will have to make. Like I said, in other jurisdictions, they have had, based on our understanding, nobody's had this challenge that Brantford is facing.
And all these recommendations, they come with some dollar amounts attached to them, but that could be part of the development fees in the first place that development pays for development, right? As far as
That's
adding
right.
to, we don't need to add this to the tax roll. We could actually just have it part of our fees and services, so it actually is in place and we can move forward with it quickly.
That's right.
And just my comments, then I think I commented last time how pleased I was with your original report, what your findings were, and how very clear they were, and how they were. You covered everything that I've ever heard, every complaint I've ever heard, and going forward, you also now look at solutions with staff. And I like this idea that the collaborative team, the team approach, will work very well, and having somebody follow development from beginning to end. I really like all the recommendations you've done here, and I like the fact that you've took the best practices in the province and you've applied them to us here. And I'm okay with Brantford being one of those best practice leaders as far as development goes. I'm in favor of development. I just want development to pay for development, and I want it to be consistent. And I think to our staff, we probably haven't been as fair to our staff as we'd like to, because it's only been recently that we've actually had a full staff department in our planning department in the first place. And we've got a full complement planning staff. We've got a good team there. Moving forward with these recommendations, we'll just assist them. We'll help them, make them feel, I'm certainly much more confident in what we do going forward, and us being leaders. So I'm really pleased with the report that you presented and the way you presented it and the findings that you had. What will be the process that we roll this? I know we got it coming to council on October 13th, but how do we get back to those that were involved in the process, development community, to show them what we found and what we're recommending before it comes to the October 13th council meeting?
I don't think we haven't really discussed that between us, but that's certainly a good point that we can raise. I can talk with Asia and Rosemary about that after, but we haven't discussed that in terms of how we can take it to the next step.
I just want maybe to the chair, we could find a solution to make sure that with those that have been involved and have consulted with us on this issue for, well, I guess many years, as Councilor McCurry said, we've been at this for at least 3 years that I know of,
Yes.
maybe longer. Having them at least respond back to them to say, we've heard you, because you've heard all those comments, and here's our solutions. I think that they would be very pleased. It would be nice to have them as a part of the cheerleading team when it comes to council on October 13th with these new recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor. I fully support that and agree with that. Through the clerk, would this be an appropriate time to? I know we're accepting a report, but where would be a good slot to make a recommendation for one of the team here to arrange for a meeting, a presentation to our business community?
So through the chair, because right now you don't have your motion on the floor. When
Right,
the motion does go on the floor, you could move that the presentation be received and that staff be directed or
Okay.
to have the
Okay.
consultant do so. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. So with that, are there any other comments before we move on? I would like to say that I've noticed the difference with our planning department, engineering, and building department, that there seems to be more enthusiasm, and they're not waiting for this report to be passed by council. They're already implementing some of the recommendations, and I think that's wonderful to see that. So thank you, staff, for doing that. So if there are no other questions, I need a mover and a seconder to accept these. Councillor Carpenter, seconded by Councillor McCreary. Any discussion?
Yes,
No?
I just, the amendment that was suggested by our clerk, I'd like to add that in as well. And
Okay.
hopefully it's
Can you capture that and read that out, if you would, please? Just bear with me for a minute here.
Yeah, so just to confirm, so the motion would be that the presentation from KPMG be received and that staff be directed to schedule a meeting with members involved in the development community to provide the implementation and strategy update.
Yes, please. And if we could include Economic Development Advisory Committee in that, they participated. So, okay. So on the that's included in the overall. We don't need a motion for the amendment. Okay, that's all captured. So with that, if there are no other questions, Madam Clerk, would you call the vote, please?
All those in favor of the motion before you, please raise your hand and leave it raised until your name is called. Councillor McCreary, Mayor Davis, Councillor Carpenter, Councillor Utley. The motion is approved unanimously.
That's fantastic. Thanks, everyone. Yeah, this has been well worth waiting for. CAO Hutchings, would you like to add something?
Yeah, just a process question, Mr. Chair. So you just passed a resolution to involve the people we consulted with, which I wholeheartedly agree with. That won't to Councillor Carpenter's question about having some people supporting us at October 13th. That action we can't take till council approves that. It's a council recommendation. So I don't want to disappoint Councillor Carpenter and not being able to do the function until so it's maybe as a process thing we can send out the report or some sort of link to the report or something. Just trying to think of a process, Julia, that we can. I don't know if it necessarily meets what Councillor Carpenter's intention was of that, to do it before the October 13th meeting. If there's any other suggestion that we can make sure it's communicated out to the people who gave us input into the report.
Councillor Carpenter?
well, see, my report says confidential, so I can't speak to it to the development industry. Yet we're in a public meeting, and I heard the chair say that we were live. And then I see Sanya's report says draft. So, whatever we send out, as long as the community knows what is coming to council and in advance, so they can read through the report and the recommendations. I understand that it's not approved till it comes to council. That's process, but I just want to make sure that they're involved. To date, we haven't gone back to them to say what we found, what we recommend. So it is still just a recommendation going to council, but certainly they should be able to know in advance.
Good point, Councillor. CEO Hutchings.
So yeah, so we'll work on a process to get let them know that they were interviewed, there was input was taken, and that's here's a point on our website. They can see the report if it's not confidential. I'm not aware of it being. They say in your report it's confidential. We'll make sure that they have access to it and we can communicate back out to them. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I need a mover and seconder for the minutes, please. Councillor Carpenter, Mayor Davis, any discussion? If not, would you raise your hands in favor until the clerk calls your name, please?
Councillor Utley, Councillor Carpenter, Councillor McCreary, Mayor Davis. The minutes are approved unanimously.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. There are no notices of motion. Did I miss one thing out there, or are we good? We're good. Okay, thank you. So with that, the meeting is adjourned, and thank you everybody for getting us to this point. This is a big achievement, I tell you. So have a great weekend, everyone. Thank you again, Sana and Bruce and all your team. Please extend our thanks to them.
And thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay.